Yeah, and kudos, you nailed the Jordan Davis. But AJ Brown, not only is he proven, he's tough. He fits the mantra. He's going to appeal himself to the fan base. He's going to pick up yards after the catch. This is an explosive guy who makes plays. He's hard to bring down. And you line him up opposite of a Devonta Smith, well, suddenly this is a really locked and loaded offense for Jalen Hurts to operate. And I love what they did in terms of adding two blue chip guys. One's a proven commodity, Jordan Davis, who we've spoken about at length here on the defensive side of the ball. If you remember back when Fletcher Cox was a rookie, he only played, I believe, 49% of the snaps.
49, yeah.
Yeah, so I see that kind of mentorship and that protege relationship.
Ric Serritella, who's always gracious enough to come on with us before the draft and after the draft to try and analyze what got done around the league, but most specifically with the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, since we bother you as much as we do and get you on the show as often as you do you have to take a deep breath every time the Eagles pick? Because you know that, all right, McMullen and McDonald be asking me about what that little Eagles doing. And I'm going on Birds 365. Can we make the draft even harder?
No, as long as I got a cup of Joe, top of the morning, fellas. I loved what the Eagles did. I feel like I've been singing their praise so much. I was like, man, this will be an easy spot to do. I've been talking Birds all week long.
Yeah, they did make a splash, obviously, on day one, Thursday, moving up the targeted move up to Jordan Davis. I think a lot of people expected that. That was my prediction before the draft. But then the AJ Brown move. I mean, that is, and Nick Sirianni talked about this, Rick, and that's not projection, man. That's a proven guy. So as much as you talk about talent with some of these young receivers we saw going in this draft, and there were a ton of them, and they've that's what college football is making these days, is wide receivers. But it's all projection. AJ Brown, he's already proven it.
Yeah, and kudos, you nailed the Jordan Davis. But AJ Brown, not only is he proven, he's tough. He fits the mantra. He's going to appeal himself to the fan base. He's going to pick up yards after the catch. This is an explosive guy who makes plays. He's hard to bring down. And you line him up opposite of a Devonta Smith, well, suddenly this is a really locked and loaded offense for Jalen Hurts to operate. And I love what they did in terms of adding two blue chip guys. One's a proven commodity, Jordan Davis, who we've spoken about at length here on the defensive side of the ball. If you remember back when Fletcher Cox was a rookie, he only played, I believe, 49% of the snaps.
49, yeah.
Yeah, so I see that kind of mentorship and that protege relationship. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but then the Cam Jurgens pick is just a natural progression from Kelsey to Jurgens, and Jurgens has that inside versatility, could play all three interior positions. I mean, they really set themselves up for a team that was coming off a playoff run under a first-year head coach to add those chips. I think they position themselves to be the front runners in the NFC East, and they add building blocks for the future.
Very nice. Let me go back to the defensive edition with Davis. I took a call last night on WIP from an Eagle fan who was a little worried. Jody, this guy only played X amount of snaps this year. He's as big as a house. Are we going to have to worry about this guy? And I told him, you can't worry about the snaps because Georgia was just that good along the defensive line. They needed to play all those other guys. Shoot, Jermaine Johnson up and left them because he couldn't get enough snaps. So it's a dicey thing that the Georgia coaching staff had to do. He proved to me when he dropped 20 pounds before the combine, if he wants to get in better shape because of it. Any concern? Did you ever get a feel, or through your sources or your coaches that whatever, that this young man might enjoy the fact that he was the 13th pick in the draft a little too much and not worry about his conditioning?
Well, I think anytime you balloon to the size of a refrigerator, you got to be concerned, right? I mean, to me, I personally was concerned when I was assessing him last spring, and I said, well, hey, here's a guy who was, around 380. I mean, teams are going to invest a first-round pick, but I would assume there's going to be some language in that contract to meet some, tip the scales when he reports in August. He's going to have to weigh a certain weight. And we talked about it. When I spoke to Jordan Davis, I spoke to him at length, and I asked him a lot of questions. I probably hung around 35, 40 minutes listening to him respond. So I feel like I got somewhat to know the personality. He came across as a very mature young man. He owned every criticism, never made an excuse, said, I'm trying to work better. I'm committed to the process. And he did tend to enjoy Atlantic City, which is not too far from Philadelphia. But I mean, listen, are you concerned? It's always in the back of your head. But I feel good about the player, the person. And listen, guys, we're asking this guy to take up space. He's in a hell of an athlete, even if he packs on some pounds. The way he moves, to me, it's incredible.
Yeah, Rick, I mean, going through this process when it comes to Jordan and some of the things, and I think the one, the biggest concern is what Jody brought up, and that's conditioning. But I do think too many people didn't see that Georgia defense and what they asked those players to do. And not just Jordan, it was Trayvon Walker as well, who went number one. They weren't asked to rush the passer, pin their ears back. Trayvon Walker was setting the edge. It was very disciplined defense. Jordan Davis was tying up two blockers at times. I always joke, you watch Nakobe Dean highlights and your eye goes right in front of him. Well, who's there? Who's there making it easy for the missile to go through the hole? And that's Nakobe Dean. How many people you think just didn't understand what Georgia was trying to do, and that affected their thought process of the particular players? Because I know Alan Wolking, who's the Eagles director of college scouting, used to be their Southeast area scout, constantly brought that up and said, these guys weren't asked to do this. And the transfer portal is part of that as well, because Georgia has so many talented people. They wanted to get them playing time, so they didn't transfer.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So, I mean, first off, people don't realize you think Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis are good. Wait until you get a load of Jalen Carter next year, because he's better than the both of them. And so that's the kind of talent that was on the defensive line. So I think it goes back to figuring out for a scout, like, can he not do it, or was he just not asked to do it? And for Jordan Davis, I think he fits that category. Like, I forget what percentage of third down snaps he played, but it was slim to none. And can he do it? Well, I see a skill set that could translate eventually to third down. Was he asked to do it? Not so much. And so that's a tricky situation. But I'll tell you what, guys, sometimes the NFL is about mismatches, and the game of football starts in the trenches. And even if this guy is a two-down player, what's the difference as a slot receiver, a slot cornerback? I mean, the NFL is such a niche specialty kind of game on Sundays. To me, this guy's giving you a mismatch 2 out of 3 plays. I'll take it.
Ricky, when the Eagles had the 3 first-round picks before they made the trade with the Saints, when they had 15, 16, and 19, I said right here on Birds 365, John, I think they could actually take a linebacker in the first round. I know it's been 40-plus years, but at number 19, if Nakobe Dean is still sitting there and they don't take him, you're going to be looking at one angry amigo here. Well, they maneuver around and they end up with only 1 first-round pick. But there's Nakobe Dean in the second round. He's still on the board. You got to take him, right? They pass. They go with Kelsey's replacement. I can't believe it. They get to the third round, and Nakobe Dean is still sitting there. And they're the team that pulls the trigger on him. And I think they get the best linebacker in college football from this past year. I can't believe that he fell down into the 80s where he was selected. Why? Was it more so the pec injury? Was it more so the previous injuries that he had had? And oh, by the way, with those previous injuries, he was out was the most productive linebacker in all of college football. Was it the fact that he's a little undersized? I'm still trying to wrap my head around how the hell Eagles got him in the 80s. What did your sources say? Why do you think he dropped as much when you get some people like, Ric Serritella, who said he could be a first-round talent, knows what he's talking about? Why did he drop as much as he did?
Yeah, are you kidding me? That was my reaction. What an incredible value pick. To me, the talent is first round. The main reason why he slid, in my opinion, that medical recheck in Indianapolis didn't come back so nice. And this torn pec, there was a lot of team doctors that felt like he needed to have surgery. And my early understanding is the Eagles are going to let him kind of try to play through it. He may still need to elect to have surgery on that injury, which means what? Okay, he redshirts this season.
Yeah.
Big deal. Yeah,
exactly.
right. And so that's why I said, like, you're stacking chips for the present. Now you're stacking chips for the future. And to me, that's the luxury of accumulating all this draft equity. This is what the years and years and years of accumulating all these draft picks, quality over quantity. And yeah, did the height concern some teams before they discovered the pec? Absolutely. I think there was concerns in his pass coverage more than anything, but at the end of the day, when you're talking about a guy who was a top 15, top 20 talent, to get him at 84, Nakobe Dean and the Notre Dame safety Kyle Hamilton, who they got at, I think, 14, who was my number 4 overall.
Baltimore,
those were 2 great value picks.
Yeah, and the Ravens, whew, what a draft by the Ravens as a whole, but we'll get into that. I do want to talk about Nakobe because the one thing where I wouldn't have taken him at 24, but yeah, 84 is absurd, the value there. Well, the reason I wouldn't have taken him at 24 is what you just talked about, pass coverage, Rick. And we talk about, with Jordan Davis and third downs and how important they are in the modern NFL. I look at that kid, and even with the athleticism, and then I look at the other side of the football here in Philadelphia. They don't even have to get out of town. And I see Dallas Goedert and the George Kittles of the world and the Mark Andrews and the Travis Kelce's. They're just big, rangy guys. I mean, they can play basketball in front of a 5'11" kid, even if he can cover them and just kind of dominate the middle of the field. Is that pass coverage any bit of a concern, especially the way this league is shifting?
Yeah, I mean, we just mentioned the mismatches, right? So when you got these big, towering 6'4", 6'5" athletic playmaking tight ends, you're talking about a half a foot height difference, right? And so you could just throw up some alley oops, and yeah, I mean, I looked around the league. There was 8 tight ends that had over 90 targets in the NFL last year. That's never happened in the history of the NFL, as far as I could find. So you're talking about a quarter of the league now have injected these playmaking, pass catching tight ends, and that's one of the newest fads. I mean, everybody's looking to add a playmaker tight end, run a spread attack, toss the ball all over the parking lot. Every team is slinging it and winging it, and I think you need an eraser type. And whether that's a linebacker or a safety that can do that, I think you do have to question the consistency that Nakobe Dean can guard these guys. He's going to be left in some vulnerable spots if you ask him to do it a lot. But hey, I mean, he's capable. He's got the quickness. He's got the lateral ability to do it. But you're just putting him in a mismatched situation in terms of height.
Nah, come on. They don't need him to cover tight ends. Eagles got great depth at safety. That's who got. Oh, shoot. Maybe John's got a point here. Let me ask you about the 2 guys that the Eagles took on day number 3. Didn't quite understand how he's modus operandi. They had to give up a lot of the draft capital to get the wide receiver they wanted. They had to give up the capital to get Jordan Davis. So they ended up with many less picks than when they started the whole process. So they had 2 6th-round picks. Kyron Johnson. I read your scouting report on him. You thought the kid had some talent, but they've already got Hassan Reddick. He was their big off-season free agent acquisition, and this kid's a Sam linebacker more than anything else. He's a little undersized if you're going to put him on the defensive line. He's one of those tweener guys. How does Kyron Johnson play in the National Football League?
Well, I think when you look at the backgrounds, you mentioned Hassan Reddick, and then you look at Kyron Johnson. He's a guy that's played off ball, and then he's also been asked to get after the quarterback at times during his college career, which I don't think that's going to be his strong suit at the next level. But we talk about these offenses. Everybody runs these spread attacks. On defense, I mean, I think a lot of these defenses now are more of a hybrid mold where you need interchangeable parts and guys that can be mixed and matched. But I think Kyron Johnson is really going to be a guy that makes a living on special teams. I think it was more of a special teams play, right? And that's what Kyron Johnson, I think, is bringing to the table.
Yeah, and Rick, when you talk about a kid in the 6th round, I mean, what's wrong with taking a special teams player? The Eagles were terrible on coverage last year. And
1/3 of the game.
Yeah. He was a special teams captain. He had 17 tackles. He runs a 4.4. And in the past, they've had players like Chris Maragos and Brian Bremen who they weren't playing defense. And if they were, you knew there was a bunch of injuries. They were just there to play special teams. And for years, the Eagles had one of the best special teams groups in the NFL. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think there's some guys are good at special teams and some guys aren't. And athleticism isn't just what it's about. What is your take on teams drafting for special teams?
I place a huge emphasis on special teams. I know we don't talk about it a lot, but like I just said, it's 1/3 of the game. You take a look at the quality teams year in and year out, and I have a chance to circulate around some of the training camps. One of the common denominators, all these top caliber teams, they spend a good portion of practice on special teams. I mean, you go to New England, they're spending an hour just on special teams each practice. Philadelphia is the same way. They spend a lot of time on special teams. And so, Maragos is a good one. And I do think that Philadelphia came in with a specific agenda, had some certain needs that they wanted to address. And yeah, at day 3, it's window dressing, right? I mean, we talked about it. Those first 4 guys are all either going to be starting from day 1 or eventually going to be starting. So you added 4 new potential starters. Hey, why not solidify some special teams? I'm all for it.
All right. Is Grant Calcaterra going to contribute on special teams too? Because I don't know if that's the case. Putting the concussion issues aside, which is not easy to do because he dropped out of football for a year because of it. But assuming that doesn't become an issue, is he good enough to be their tight end too? He's a sprint out guy rather than an inline guy, which means they're going to be using guided more inline. I just kind of shrug my shoulders when they made that pick. Another tight end. I know they've got nothing locked in as their backup tight end, but they got a whole bunch of options, including the newly minted tight end J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who they like a lot as a blocker. Did you like the Calcaterra pick? Give us a line of logic behind it.
Well, I'll give you the logic. I'll get there, but I think talking to some teams, they had this guy completely off their board due to the concussions. I think he had 3 of them.
He had 3. Yeah,
that were reported. So, this guy's one hit away. From hanging up the cleats. Now, would he have gone higher had he not had the concussions? I think we just talked about the pass catching phenomenon of these athletic playmaking tight ends. Well, that's the appeal to the Craig Calcaterras of the world. And I think what Howie Roseman's envisioning there is like, hey, you've got Smith and Brown on the outside. You got now these 2 tall tree trunks, Goddard and Calcaterra. Maybe I play a little 12 personnel. And, again, the mismatch equation, Jalen Hurts, some underneath security blankets. So did I love the pick? Not really, because I to me, lottery draft picks are like lotto tickets. I want to eliminate as much risk as possible. This guy's a risky pick. Now, does the upside outweigh the risk? Hey, that remains to be seen. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, you're right. And the Eagles need help at tight end too. But one of the issues, and we're talking 6th round. So as you mentioned, Rick, at that point, it's more of a lotto ticket. But the Eagles could use some lotto tickets at safety, or they could use some lotto tickets at cornerback, even though they have a bunch with the Tay Gowans of the world and the Kerry Vincents, who were recent draft picks that they traded for. Mac McCain. They always talk up these young corners. Zach McPherson, who was a 4th round pick last year. Do you think when it gets to day 3 later in the draft, need should become a bigger part of the process? Or do you think the opposite in the fact that, hey, just take the best player that late, who you think the best player is?
I'm a big believer, BPA, best player available. I think when you start drafting for need, that's when you start making reaches. That's when you start making poor decisions. I think if you stay true to your board, even if you already have adequate depth, it's funny. Today's NFL, it used to be injuries kind of take care of the depth situations. And now it's like, hey, the divas and the personalities will probably take care of the depth situation. Somebody will be asking themselves out of town. So to me, stack the depth, even if you have it, get the best available player. It'll find a way to work itself out. And you always try to find a way to get your best players on the field. And I think the safety position has truly been devalued. I don't think a lot of them were taken in the draft. I believe they brought in Reed Blankenship from Middle Tennessee State,
Reed
who
Blankenship.
the coaches, I mean, the coaches love him over there. I know he was injured 2 years ago and came off of an injury, so he may not have had the film that scouts wanted to see. He may not have ran the time that teams wanted to see. But Reed Blankenship, I mean, that's an equivalent of a day 3 draft selection right there. And so I think when you take a look at the depth of the safety position and realize not a lot of these guys came off the board, well, hey, let's bring a couple in the undrafted free agency and see if we can uncover a gem. And I think, safety is the one position you can do that at, right?
Yeah. And let me follow up real quick because you talked about Reed. They signed 3 corners. So it's Josh Jobe from Alabama, the kid from Clemson, Mario Goodrich, and Josh Blackwell from Duke. Did you have any draftable grades on those guys?
Yeah, I had Joby as a day 3 guy coming out of Alabama. He's a multiple year starter. He's technically sound. Backpedal could be a little bit smoother, but I think a guy that's going to come in and compete for a 53-man roster. I know the Clemson kid, I think, got one of the bigger signing bonuses, so I guess they kind of value his skill set the most. But I'll tell you what, this Joshua Blackwell, we had him out at the NFLPA Bowl. Now, granted, I've never seen 7-inch hands. He's got some of the smallest hands I've ever seen, but I guess that's why he plays cornerback and not wide receiver. So, but I mean, I think, as funny as it sounds, like you see that as a scout and you kind of
7-inch hands. Wow.
Yeah, so that's the only knock. The kid could cover. He had a couple interceptions throughout the week. So he's a smart young man and a clean character. So I think all those guys have a shot to be at least practice squad material, but that's what it's about, bringing in competition. That you notice they're all Power 5 program players, and so they're going to battle it out in training camp. Try to find it. Again, guys, I'm pulling out. I'm not even a stat guy. 27 to 33% of every NFL rosters consist of undrafted free agents, right?
Yeah.
But I got to ask you about a player that I was waiting for his name to be called, and then he was. Your cornerback from Ochita Baptist, who you started telling about to me in November, and then you got him at your All-Star game, and you said, Jody, this kid's going to be drafted. Nobody knew who he was 2 months ago, and now he's going to be drafted. He went in the 6th round, and the Eagles are taking a tight end and special teams guy in the 6th round. How good is that kid going to be?
No, he's a baller. And like I said, I mean, Rod Woodson was in love. He worked his way out to the Senior Bowl because his performance was that good. And they said, hey, well, NFLPA Bowl, those are more of your day 3 undrafted guys, right? Let's get him up to the Senior Bowl, see how he does there. He went locked down, and I think he's going to thrive at the next level. He probably went later in the draft because he's a small school kid. And we did see 24 FCS players this year, up from 6 just a year ago. So that was encouraging to see. But yeah, I mean, he would have looked good in Kelly Green or Midnight Green, but I like the Gregory Jr. pick. And we talked about Joshua Williams, Fayetteville State, another one of these big cornerbacks that came off the board early. So, it's always good to get that confirmation. And you just, along the scouting trails, you just kind of fall in love with some of these guys, and who better to root for than the story of an underdog, as Philly fans know.
Yeah. Well, the Eagles did well, Rick, but I got to tell you, I was at the NovaCare complex, and every time I looked up, it seemed like the Baltimore Ravens were getting a good player. In the 4th round, I think they had half the draft. It was just bang, 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 bang. Is that your I don't like the term winners and losers, but when you look at your immediate reaction to the draft polls around the league, was Baltimore at the top of your list?
Yeah, I would say a lot of my winners were up and down the turnpike. You can take it up to the New York Jersey teams. You could take it down to Baltimore, where I really thought, you talk about staying true to your board. Eric DaCosta, best player available, man. We talked about Kyle Hamilton. They get leapfrogged by the Eagles for Jordan Davis. The Texans later on in the draft get wind that Baltimore was interested in John Mechie. The Texans trade up and leapfrog him there. And Eric DaCosta is cool as a cucumber, man. He just stays true to his board, takes the best player available. I wish I had the list in front of me because the players they plucked were phenomenal. But in terms of best player available, that's what DaCosta did here. And I know they lost Hollywood Brown. How about this, guys? In a day where, all these guys are, scrubbing their social media clean and making all these announcements and declarations, how about Baltimore? Credit to the organization. Hollywood Brown requested a trade immediately following the season. Nobody even heard a peep about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Draft day.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Eric is tremendous. But I got the list.
25th overall pick is what they actually chose him 3 years ago. So he got the same exact value for him.
Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum in the first round, Ojabo in the second round, Travis Jones in the third round, Daniel Falele from Minnesota, the big kid from Minnesota, Jalen Armour Davis from Alabama, Charlie Kohler, Jordan Stout, Isaiah Likely in the fourth round. They got all those guys in the fourth
round.
But
wait. I got to ask about one of those.
Matt Araiza, you're going to ask, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
The punt god.
Punters were taken before the punt god. Yeah. What is this? A godless sport we're now playing?
I don't know what happened with that one, Jody. I mean,
hang time. That was everything I heard. Hang time. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I've never seen somebody boot the ball that way, and if he's not some kind of weapon at the next level, then I don't know who is. But yeah, the Jordan Stout kid. Penn State, there was another punter that came off the board there, but the punt god, he wants to do punting. Now he wants to do field goal kicking. He wants to do kickoffs. So we'll see where it all goes.
Jody knows because he lives in Marlton, New Jersey, who the mayor used to be mayor, Randy Brown. They call it the Ravens Kicking Academy. When it comes to kicking, I'm going to defer to the Ravens. Even though I love Matt Araiza, I'm going to defer to the Ravens when it comes to kicking. Justin Tucker's the best kicker I've ever seen. And by the way, Sam Cook was good for years and years and years and years. So they tend to know what they're doing on special teams. And it starts obviously with John Harbaugh.
Well, yeah, and we talked about special teams and the good teams valuing that, right? But just to dive into some of those picks, the Harbaugh to Harbaugh connection, Ojabo goes from Michigan to Baltimore, and in my opinion, they got the best pass rusher out of Michigan in this year's draft. Then they go pluck the best center with Linderbaum and that inside run. I mean, the Ravens might as well go to the triple option here. They pluck two more tight end, big tree trunk tight end, and then Likely out of Coastal Carolina as a pass catching tight end. And again, like they already took a tight end. They already got Mark Andrews. They're in the war room. They said, hey, man, can we find a home for this guy? We got enough balls to go around. Hey, sure, just take him. We'll figure it out. And again, that's the mentality that you have to have, I believe. And
that big kid from Minnesota, Rick, he's got like Jordan Mailata size. Yeah. He's just massive.
Yeah, and I think, Charlie Villanueva would be the comparison if he reaches peak potential. Now he does have a little bit hip stiffness and has some trouble bending and plays a little bit upright. So I think he's more of a developmental guy. But man, if they can reel in some of those, which is to be expected from a 309, 6'9", 390-pound gargantuan, who by the way is the biggest player ever drafted in the history of the draft.
Yeah. And the Eagles did the same thing with Jordan Mailata a couple of years, and they showed patience and they waited and they developed them, and now they got a potential Pro Bowl left tackle. I want to ask you before we let you run about a couple other guys, Eagles side, after the draft. You stayed true to your rating on Carson Strong all year long. Coming into the year, you had him as fourth or fifth best quarterback. You stuck with him as a fourth or fifth and put a fourth-round grade on him. He ends up dropping out of the draft, undrafted signee. The knee issue, I guess, scared some teams off. I watched a couple of games because I'm on the air till 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, so I get to watch Nevada football. Kid's got a howitzer for a right arm, but he's purely a pocket passer. Eagles find some gold here in undrafted free agency in Carson Strong?
I think so. And I think he could still emerge as potentially being the best quarterback in this year's draft, albeit a short lifespan, because that's what the medical recheck. He was one of those guys that also got called back to Indianapolis, and the reports came back, hey, he's got a degenerate knee. He might have 3 or 4 years. You know, you might remember Joseph Adai had the same condition, and he lasted about 3 or 4 years. And so that's what you're getting with Carson Strong. Oh, by the way, he's had some collarbone and spinal issues dating back to high school. Oh, by the way, he's a very confident young man, which, you know, you need to have a little bit at the quarterback position, but he's borderline cocky and rubs some people the wrong way. So I get it. Carson Strong is going to make teams feel queasy. They're going to bypass him, but then you say, well, who got the biggest undrafted free agent contract? There's a reason why. It's Carson Strong. And so, you know, to me, like, there's a short window here to work with, but he's got all the tools in the toolbox. He's more of your traditional pocket passer, a la, you know, a Sam Bradford type. But you know what? To me, he can make all the throws. I also didn't love his body language, right? And now maybe he's had some humble pie. And if he comes in, goes to work, puts his head down, I mean, I think that things could get intriguing around the quarterback position.
And by the way, to let the listeners know, EJ Perry from Brown, the Eagles also agreed to terms with him. He has since backed out. He's going to sign with Jacksonville. And that had to do with timing. Carson Strong, the Eagles were waiting after the draft for Carson Strong to make his decision. They thought he was going to go in a different direction, so they agreed to terms with EJ Perry as well. Then Carson Strong came back and said, yeah, I'll sign with you guys. And then they let EJ out of his agreement, and he went to Jacksonville, which makes sense because you don't need the two best. A lot of people had those guys, Rick, as the two best undrafted quarterbacks after the draft.
Yeah, I really liked Brown. I thought he was phenomenal at the East-West Shrine Bowl practices when I took a deep dive there. You could state a case. He was the most impressive quarterback of the bunch that week, and he's got sneaky athleticism, tested extremely well. Now, you know, there's some accuracy concerns there. He's a different type of quarterback that's going to work the short to intermediate types of the field. You can call him maybe a poor man's Mac Jones. And so, you know, I think that with Gardner Minshew already there, Carson Strong on board, and, you know, hey, the Eagles didn't have to do that. And that's another thing I think that kind of gets around the league, that, hey, those little things don't go unnoticed when it comes to the players, at least. And so, yeah, it makes sense all the way around.
All right, give us your read on Kennedy Brooks, the running back that the Eagles also picked up in the undrafted phase. People thought that they would draft a free agent running back at some point when they had lesser picks. They didn't go that direction. He's the only guy they brought in, as John just mentioned. They came up with an agreement for 2 quarterbacks. It got cut back to 1. They signed a whole bunch of cornerbacks. Only 1 running back. Is Kennedy Brooks an NFL back? Do you think he's got a chance to make this team, Rick?
I think he has some staying potential. Absolutely. Here's a guy, you could classify him jack of all trades, master of none. Not the biggest guy, not the fastest guy, isn't going to wow you with the measurables, but he's a good football player. And I think running backs, again, you could pluck a guy in the undrafted free agency. If he fits your system, this guy, you know, he's going to be a capable backup. He could come in. He can keep the ball between the tackles on first and second down if you need him to. He can catch the ball out of the backfield on third down if you ask him to do that. You know, he transferred around a little bit there in college, so didn't really have the most stable collegiate career. And I think he came out as a pretty highly recruited player. So the potential is there. I just think that, man, some of the free agent running backs, unbelievable. I mean, I think a handful of these guys are going to stick, and Kennedy Brooks could be one of those guys. So I think teams had a hard time kind of getting over the 40-yard dash time. We're so enamored with speed. And when you kind of stack up the board and you got these evenly close guys on day 3, 9 times out of 10, the teams are going to go with the faster guy. And I think that's kind of what happened there to Kennedy Brooks.
The great Ric Serritella, at Ric Serritella on Twitter. Follow him there. You can read him at si.com/NFL/draft, the NFL Draft Bible. Best in the business as far as I'm concerned. Let's end it on the quarterbacks, Rick, and the fact that Kenny Pickett's the only one who went. That surprised me. I thought if Malik Willis got to 20, I thought the Steelers would go in that direction. Evidently, they still feel the burn of Dan Marino decades later. Don't want to let the Pitt kid out of Pittsburgh. And then we don't have another quarterback to the 3rd round in an era where it's all about the quarterbacks. So the NFL kind of said this class really does stink in our mind. Is there any way to take that?
I think we all got bamboozled,
Yeah.
right? We all thought
no. Not all of us. Some of us got bamboozled. Mr. Eagle's going to take him at 18. Not everybody.
Well, I'll stick to my guns here. I still think Malik Willis was the most attractive quarterback. I'll say it that way, in terms of the skill set he possesses and the intangibles that I'm looking for to work with at the next level. Now, you hear that he was a media fabrication and that Liberty played a dumbed down offense that really didn't ask him to do a lot of reads. And so that was the concern or the knock on Malik Willis. And hey, for whatever it's worth, I still think the Falcons made an extreme mistake taking Desmond Ridder over that kid. And I understand why, because Marcus Mariota is not a durable quarterback. At some point, the backup is going to be asked to play valuable snaps. And Desmond Ridder's, by the way, got 49 starts and is a mature guy. He's got kids. He's going to come in and be a somewhat stable kind of hold the fort guy, I guess, in terms of a rookie. So I see why they went Ridder over Willis, but the upside of Willis to me is what the great appeal is. And, I know I got my 2023 mock draft coming out. Jody's going to pick on me because I got Carolina picking number 1 overall, and he's a big Matt Corral believer, but I got them taking CJ.
You don't understand quarterbacks, Serritella. All right, Carolina, no Carolina. That's where I was going to go for the last question. Let's say Jalen Hurts doesn't have a very good year. Carson Strong goes, he wrecks his knee because it was falling apart to begin with anyway. With the first pick in the 2023 draft, the Philadelphia Eagles, not the Carolina Panthers, because Matt Corral goes in and wins game for them. But the Eagles combine the 2 picks. There's New Orleans. Do what they have to. Add another one. They've got the first pick. Whose name is being called? Is it Stroud? Is it the Alabama kid? Who's going to be the number 1 quarterback taken off the board next year? And it'll be a slight adjustment from 20 for Pickett or 80-something for the number 2. Chances are they're going 1 and 2 next year at the quarterback position. What order you have them in?
Yeah, we're going to get back to our regularity next year. I got 5 quarterbacks in my top 15 or 16 pick. And CJ Stroud is my number 1 guy right now. But it's so close with him and Bryce Young. I mean, I could wake up a different day of the week and think differently. I just think that Stroud's a couple inches taller. I think 2 inches taller, can make all the throws, both of these guys. I think Bryce Young, as funny as it sounds, and I know Alabama, all they do is reload. And Ohio State, both of these guys, they got to show that they can roll with the punches of their supporting cast. All these guys losing all these big play NFL caliber wide receivers, can they still be those Heisman Trophy type of quarterbacks? And I think, both of these guys are franchise signal callers. And what the Eagles did to set themselves up here, they allowed themselves to not take Ric Serritella's advice and draft a quarterback. They're going to let Jalen Hurts have another year at this rodeo. And they did take Carson Strong as an insurance policy. Gardner Minshew's still in the mix, but we talked about it. He didn't draft a quarterback, but he went out and signed the best available free agent quarterback. So I wouldn't put it past Howie to draft a quarterback. I'm leaning towards Stroud over Bryce Young, but a lot can happen between now and then, fellas.
Quickie, who are those other 3 quarterbacks you got going in the top 15?
Yeah, we got Will Levis out of Kentucky just sneaking in. I think Anthony Richardson I had going to the Steelers out of Florida. And then Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami. You know, the Giants failed to pick up the option on Daniel Jones. Joe Shane putting his stamp on the team. I think next year they'll also be in the
and a lot can change, Rick, in 12 months. I think there were a lot of people.
Yeah.
You bring up supporting cast. There are a lot of people this time last year talking about Sam Howell as a top 10 pick, and all of a sudden he falls apart with his supporting cast leaves, and I think he's 5th round. He went in the 5th round, right?
First pick, 5th round.
Yeah. So a lot can happen in 12 months. A lot.
Yeah, Jake Fromm, right? I mean, these guys are very volatile, and that's what happens from one year to the next in college football. We're bound to see somebody shoot up draft boards that we don't even see coming, and somebody who's probably been buried on a depth chart somewhere. And, you know, hey, I know Jody's a fan of Caleb Williams, who's got 2 years of eligibility remaining, but USC, they're like the poster child of NIL now, free agency of college football. They're just taking everybody, come on over, $3 million.
What about, hey, I know.
Why not?
I got to throw out another name because, you know, Spencer Rattler, people were talking about him, and all of a sudden he loses his job to Caleb Williams, and then he's got, I think he's at South Carolina now.
Yeah.
Any chance for a rebound from him at South Carolina?
No, without a doubt. You know, the college football free agency carousel, you know, Keaton Slovis goes from USC to Pitt into that Kenny Pickett offense, right? And then this kid goes to South Carolina, Spencer Rattler, again, all the tools in the world. They're expecting him to be this next, you know, Oklahoma great quarterback, and things didn't really pan out because of immaturity issues. And that's what you heard coming out of high school and then into his college career. It was just the immaturity. So he transfers to South Carolina, maybe gets a fresh start, and the Gamecocks need a quarterback down there. So he's going to have every opportunity, but that's a perfect example. 5-star recruit, former first-round pick projected, almost like an afterthought coming into this college football season. Here's a guy who could pass for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. Absolutely.
As John said, a lot can change in the next 12 months. One thing that won't will be the fact that we'll continue to ask Ric Serritella to join us here on Birds 365. Ricky, thank you very much for all your appearances. Feel free to do the mocks for the next couple of months. We'll keep an eye on it for you, but we get you back on to confirm it soon enough. Thanks for joining us today.
No, always a pleasure, guys. Now that the draft is over, I'm going to have to pop down there to Ocean and catch up with a nice meal with you guys. So
very nice.
Thanks, Rick.
That is Ric Serritella from NFL Draft Bible here with us on Birds 365. Wow, we went long with Ricky. All right, quickie timeout coming up. We'll come back. We've got Jeff Mosher from Inside the Birds and InsideTheBirds.com jumping on board next hour. So keep it right here